Hi, guys, and welcome back to the IBS Freedom Podcast. I am joined by my festive and awesome co host, Amy Hollenkamp, RT in the house.
Hello, everybody.
And this is our special, mostly unscripted holiday episode. So, Sayonara 2020. Oh my God, am I right? Like, this has been a hell of a year. But I'm really excited to send off the year with you, Amy. And we have a little bit of a list. I might have gone a little bit hog wild. I tried to put together like a 12, 12 things, do like the 12, 12, 11, 10, 9. I don't know if we're going to get through all of that. So we've decided to just start at number 7, oddly enough. But first, I want to take a moment for those of you on YouTube watching us for us to show off our sweaters. So, Amy, if you would be so kind as to show everybody your holiday sweater.
Sure. Hold on one second. I'm going to have to move my mic, maybe.
Gorgeous. It says Meowie Christmas for those of you who cannot see.
Just a festive cat
kitties.
Sweater.
Yes. And mine, I might also have to move my mic around a little bit. Mine is all of the things in 2020. So we've got a coronavirus star on the tree, the murder hornets, meth gators, the UFO. I mean, it's a very 2020 holiday shirt.
Nikki's sweater is next level. That is a next level holiday.
Right.
Sweater.
I can't even take credit for it. It's the Holderness family. They had it in their shop, and I just had to.
Oh my gosh.
To purchase it. So
I'm jealous. I want it.
It's my favorite thing ever. But let's roll right into, like I said, we're going to start with 7, and then we're going to see how far we get, and if we have time for the other ones, that we're going to go back to that. I had slated, dear Amy, 7 best pieces of dietary advice. Care to kick us off?
Sure. And some of these.
No pressure.
I'm not feeling the pressure. I put number 1, and this is best dietary advice, right?
Yes.
Or am I backwards?
Yes, best. These are things that we want people to do.
I would say number 1 here would be, like, you can't really starve things out of the gut. You can't really starve SIBO or Candida. And you're much better off focusing on trying to build up digestive capacity and motility versus trying to starve something out. That would be probably the number 1 thing that I try to emphasize to the clients that I work with, because it's such a hard concept to overcome, just coming from the SIBO landscape.
And Candida, like, both of those are very, like, guerrilla warfare, like, kill the enemy kind of mentality. So it's hard to take your brain and kind of turn that around.
Exactly. What about you? What's number 1 on your list?
Yeah, I think your point about, like, don't focus on starving something else, focus on nourishing yourself is a good point.
Right, for sure.
My biggest one is probably just diversity. Just broadly speaking, like, any sort of diet that restricts you is going to have some cost to it ultimately. And you've got to weigh the pros and cons of each of that. But basically, if you could try to eat as much diversity as possible, either in the way of the diversity of your plant foods, the diversity of your protein sources, the diversity of your healthy fats, that diversity will give you stability and give you a solid foundation, so that way, if you eat a little bit of sugar or a little bit of, deep fat fried whatever, it's not going to totally wreck your body. So that's my biggest one, probably.
Yeah, for sure. And I think from a nutrition standpoint in general, we overcomplicate things. I think even in the dietetic space, everything becomes very complicated.
Numbers.
Numbers, tracking how many carbs you're eating, and that sort of thing. And again, while those things can be valuable in certain scenarios, especially if under eating's at play, I almost think just making sure you're eating square meals that are balanced. One concept I think that helps with simplicity is the rule of thirds. Have you heard of that general concept? Like, looking at your plate, having a third of your plate be some sort of protein, a third of your plate some sort of, like, carb, so like a starchy vegetable or a fruit, and then the other third is some sort of non-starchy vegetable.
Yeah.
I think if you're structuring your meals in that way, you're probably going to have more balanced meals. so as a simple template, it can be really helpful.
Yep.
Just as a guidepost.
Yeah, I like that. I think mine, and I'm trying to like mentally track these. This is going to be a more challenging list than I thought it would be. So this will be number 4. We're coming up on 4. I really like to borrow from somebody who's not in the nutrition world proper and not licensed, but I think is really insightful. I'm a big nerd for Michael Pollan, and I really like his shtick of eat food, not too much, mostly plants. Like that's about as complicated as it needs to be for most people. And you know, like, and he goes into detail in his books where like a Pop-Tart is not food, it's a modified food-like product. Or, you know, like, I can't believe it's not butter light. Probably not a food so much as it is a modified food-like product. But like an apple is a food. Rice is a food. Like beef is a food. Like, so I just like that starting template. And I actually have a lot of my patients check out Michael Pollan stuff because ironically, a lot of my patients have gotten so into the depths and bowels of the internet, and they've listened to all the podcasts, all the YouTube videos, they've read all the articles, they've been in all the Facebook forums, and it's like they get their cup overfloweth with this nutritionism kind of mentality of like, I don't know what to eat, I can't trust myself, I need the pros to tell me what to eat. And I try to pull them out of that by sending them Michael Pollan lectures on YouTube and encouraging them to check that out.
Right. As much as the pros can be helpful, sometimes just the simple things, the basic templates are what's super helpful. And I think, again, like evolutionarily speaking, no one throughout time is telling you has been telling people what to eat. No one was telling the caveman, you know, eggs are bad because of cholesterol. No one was telling the caveman that. So it's become like this weird science experiment that we're trying to figure out what the best diet is, versus eating kind of intuitively and whole foods based. So that's a really good one. Trying not to overcomplicate it and keeping it simple. I like that one. All right.
What would you say is our number 5? We'll just go back and forth. This is the new format, FYI.
We're really doing this how we go, huh? I think that
I told the people semi-unscripted. I have bullet points, but that's about it.
Right. I would say this one kind of goes along with probably the first one I've said, but slightly different. I would say listening to your body versus a list of yes and no foods. I mean, that one's huge. I hear so often working with people like, you know, I eliminated all these foods and I feel like I was totally fine eating it before. And now I'm either scared to eat it or I'm having reactions that I wasn't having before. And I just think it's so important to listen to your body, not eliminate foods you don't have to eliminate. Keep your diet as broad as possible, and with the caveat of trying to reduce symptoms a little bit. I mean, obviously, we don't want you eating foods that are like major triggers. But it's a big difference eliminating like, you know, a few of your triggers versus like a huge list of FODMAP foods or histamine foods or any list you could potentially think of. And even within some of those lists, you might have triggers versus not. Like even if you were low FODMAP, you might be able to tolerate some FODMAPs, and you might also not be able to tolerate some lower FODMAP foods too, which is a good point as well. Like some people will blindly be like, oh, I can tolerate these foods because they're low FODMAP, and there might be some weird thing that they're reacting to that they're not paying
maybe you have an issue with the FODMAPs and also one squirrely allergy.
Right? Exactly.
And I think I've seen the same a lot with the gluten-free space. Like I work a lot with fellow celiacs, and there could be this big mentality of like, oh, if it's gluten-free, it's healthy. And that's not so much. Actually, can that be our number? What would it be? 6? That would be number 6 is like best nutritional advice to keep that train rolling is just because something is adhering to a particular diet, that doesn't automatically give it a free pass as healthy. If something is low FODMAP, but it's, I don't know, like what scenario? I didn't have one prepared for that. But like if something is gluten free, as an easier example, but it's a gluten free Pop Tart, we'll pick on Pop Tarts again. It's not like a health promoting food. I think that there's value in eating a little bit of junk and enjoying your life and just having a good working relationship with food and not being too strict. But if you're fooling yourself into thinking like, oh, I'm eating this lovely healthy breakfast and you're having a gluten-free Pop Tart, I mean, like you're kind of fooling yourself there, honestly. Or like, the gluten-free cookies, or when this was a big one in like the 80s and 90s when everybody was like, oh, I'm going to get the low-fat cookies and they're okay for me now. It's like, and yet,
Right.
no.
Yeah,
So,
it's funny you're attacking Pop Tarts because that was like my breakfast food all through high school. So, but I totally agree. I mean, I think that even in the health and wellness space too, like let's say like the keto space is,
mhm.
we'll eat a plate full of bacon, but like the thought of eating half of a banana
It's keto.
is beyond their comprehension and
Yep.
would freak them out.
Yep.
But again, like is really eating a plate, like a plate tip, like top to bottom of a pile of bacon, really going to be nutritionally adequate. So it's that's frustrating too. Like going to the extremes of anything like that can be in a similar way.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
Not
and
a
I've seen that as well. Like I remember this one patient when she started with me, she was doing keto and she would do keto really well for, a week or two and then she would fall off the wagon, so to speak, and have just like Cheesecake Factory cheesecake and
right.
like ice cream. And then she would do keto for a week, but then when we dug into it, her version of keto, part of it for her entailed eating a 2 pound block of Costco cheese pretty much every day. It's like,
Oh
whoa,
man.
that's a bit
Right.
much. I mean,
Right.
it's kind of keto. I mean, maybe not even because maybe that was too much protein to be truly keto. But again, it was that mentality of, oh, I'm adhering to keto, therefore it's good. And
Right.
that spans, I mean, what was it? Years ago there was a vegan documentary. Um,
Is it like forks over knives?
it was one of those, yeah, it was like the same generation of vegan documentaries. And it was whatever one.
I feel like I know what you're talking about. Oh, I
It was
can't
the
think of
one
it.
where there's a girl or like a woman. I don't think she was a nutritionist or a dietitian. I think she was just like a woman who was a vegan. And they
Right.
took these three people and she taught them how to be vegan basically for like a month or two. And they had like Joel Furman or somebody like draw their cholesterol and do some body measurements and such. And they tracked their health parameters. And I remember being so irritated by that. At one point, there was some good stuff that came out of the documentary, but one of the things that came up, the woman was showing this girl, one of the three people, they were going through the grocery store and showing like what is vegan and what is not. And she literally picked up a box of Teddy Grahams and said, these are vegan, so you can have these. And she picked up like Duncan Hines frosting and said, this is vegan, so you could eat this. And one of the participants, I mean, it was 10 years ago I watched this movie. Maybe my perception is wrong. But I think if I remember correctly, the one participant was like, okay. So she was eating Teddy Grahams dipped in frosting every single day. It's like, was that really a
Right.
good thing to
Right.
show that individual? I don't know. I mean, like I said, every now and then have some treats, live your damn life.
Right.
But it was
Exactly.
like, oh, it's vegan, so it's okay now. It's like, I don't know. I think that's still probably horrible for you to do that every day.
Right. Right.
So all of the nutritional worlds are guilty of this. Paleo, keto, you name it.
Yeah. What are we at now?
I think we have one remaining. So, dear dietitian, can you round out the top seven with one more piece of good dietary advice?
Yeah, this one again, I just see here or there, but I think it's really important to take a lunch break.
Ah,
Like literally take a break.
yeah.
I think so many people, especially now that they might be working from home because of COVID, they're not necessarily taking a lunch break that's really restorative, restful, and going to be conducive to digestion. So maybe they're
Mm,
working. But I really think taking a lunch break's like a very important act of self-care. And I also think
yeah.
it's super critical for digestion and to make that clear split between like work mode and rest and digestive mode.
Yeah.
So I would say that's how I'd want to round it off is really trying to make sure that you're taking a time to eat lunch, especially midday when you
Yep.
might have been working or busy or something like that. That would be my number 7.
Yeah, and I love that in part because it's so like apropos. You probably noticed this, but when you were telling me a story prior to getting on the recording, we were on the Zoom call, but we weren't recording yet. And you probably saw me scarf this like bar thing. I mean, I didn't scarf, but like I ate it a little quicker than I normally would.
I don't even
Um,
think I noticed.
really? I guess I really woofed it then. Yes, it's a Wegmans wholesome fruit and nut bar.
Oh,
Big fan of the Weg in this family, side note. But yeah, I definitely had one of those and didn't really make the time because it's the end of the year. And I'm going to give you my excuses. It's the end of the year, and there was like 2 patients I needed to do impromptu appointments with today. So even though I was supposed to not have anybody scheduled, I decided to squeeze a couple people in, and then I didn't really have a proper lunch. So thank you for calling me on that because I think
oh,
that was
oh.
one that I was guilty of today, actually. And I'm
Well, and
luckily going to do better in 2021.
yeah, and I do think like again, no one's perfect. Everyone's gonna have those days where it just
Yeah.
like it makes sense to eat. I'd rather someone eat and it be a little bit like more quick than be like, oh, I'm like can't get into that digestive state. I'm just gonna skip lunch. So I think like there has to be some level of flexibility there, but I think for the most
Yeah.
part, making time for lunch is key.
Yeah. I think that's a good one. Now, I will say this would be the point where we roll into our 6 worst pieces of dietary advice. However, we kind of covered that to some degree because the flip side of the coin of what we just talked about ended up being some of the worst dietary advice, and then we just gave you the opposite of that.
Right, right.
And I want to be cognizant of time for this one. So we'll skip over 6, JK LOL, and we'll go into 5 favorite antimicrobials. Now, I gave you my list. I don't know if you agree with my list or not, but what are your 5 favorite antimicrobials? With the
Yeah.
caveat, people don't go and think like, ooh, okay, I'm going to nuke all of it. And don't like go running and buying all of these right now when you haven't worked on your SIBO root causes or your
Right.
dysbiosis or your nutrition. That's not what we're endorsing. But nonetheless, professional to professional, what are some of your favorite critter killers?
Right. It's interesting because I would say in general, I feel like by the time people have find me, they've already like obliterated things and it's kind of like we're putting pieces back together.
Mm-hmm.
It's not to say again I don't use antimicrobials because I do. It's just I think a lot of times there's like a higher need for rebuilding by the time people find me. But
Yep.
I would say I really do like FC Cytal and Dysbiocide.
Yep.
I like GI Microbacs. I
Mm-hmm.
do find that that's a helpful one. Um, it's funny. So you listed SF722. I really like that one. There's
Yep.
one that's a little bit newer, the Mega Mycobalance. Have you used that one at all?
I haven't. And this is where like the herb nerd part of me comes
Right.
out because they put propolis in the product, which is like the selling point, what makes it unique. But propolis is very precious, a precious commodity for bees, and I don't want to overuse propolis. So I tend to use it as a single product if I'm going to use it. Like
Ah,
I can think of 2 patients right now who I've used propolis on this year, but I try
yeah.
not to overuse it if I can. It's kind of in the same realm of like slippery elm. Slippery elm is not super sustainable, but marshmallow root is much easier to grow sustainably. So
Ah,
I try to use marshmallow whenever I can instead of slippery elm.
no,
Um,
that's a really interesting
yeah.
consideration.
Yeah.
I
So
hadn't.
I haven't used their new product yet. No.
Okay. I do like the blend, but I
Mm-hmm.
like SF722 too. I mean, they're similar. The difference is the
Mm-hmm.
propolis.
Yeah.
Um, and again, I like berberine and ADP too. I know you had
Yeah.
listed those. So they're, I think too, like by the time people find us, they've tried different different herbs. So
Yeah,
it's
I
about
think
like
so too.
picking and choosing things that might be slightly different,
Yeah.
give them a different mix of things. Um, I did think too, like in certain situations, if there is methane, things like
Mm.
Allison can be
Yep.
helpful. Um, so I definitely think those would probably be the main ones that I use more
Yep.
often.
Yeah, I think we had parallels there. I would say the and this, I don't know, this might be gossip on the street, but we're on a podcast, we could do this. So I frequently find that people will come to me and they've already tried the candy bactins. For whatever reason, I see a lot of people who have tried the candy bactin products,
Right,
not
right.
so much the biotics research products. Maybe they're harder to source if you're not a practitioner. But um, I have been spectacularly unimpressed by the candy bactin products
Mm,
consistently. I
yeah.
can think of literally one patient right now who thought that they were great, and everybody else was like, ah, no, let's switch back to the other one. I like the other one better.
Hmm.
And
Yeah. Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was gonna say, like, again, I would say most of the people that have worked with me have done Candy Bacteria AR and BR, so it's typically not one that I've even really dabbled with.
Yeah. Don't
Um,
bother.
so,
Honestly,
no,
just don't do it.
it's good information to hear, especially if you've seen like strong parallels of okay, this didn't seem to have an effect, but this really had an effect.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I tried to give him a good go because I've read the paper, right? The one, what was it, like a 2015 paper or something, or
Right.
2014, where they said the antimicrobials were equally effective to Xifaxan, and they either had people doing FC-cidal and dysbiocide in combination, or candibactin AR and BR in combination. And I read that and thought I'd give it a whirl, but I mean, nobody liked him. And the only thing I
Right.
could wrap my head around, and this is where like the gossip on the street comes in. Um, the point of that is that I don't know if you realize this. So Metagenics changed ownership in the last
Hmm.
few years. They were like their own company, and then they were bought out by Amway. And I don't remember what the timing was, but I think the buyout with Amway was somewhere in the last 5 or 6 years. So my hypothesis, and I have nothing to back this up with, by the way, and this is not, I'm trying not to slander, but my hypothesis is that they did that study using the original formulations. And then
Hmm.
when they got bought out by Amway, I suspect that maybe the formulas were changed slightly
Hmm. Interesting.
because I started using the products after the Amway buyout. I remember that much. And I've just been super unimpressed by them. And I've tried playing with the dosing and the frequency, and like, I really haven't seen anything spectacular from them. And they're
Yeah,
pricey.
yeah, for sure. No, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Again, it's just not one I've typically even tried to use with people.
Yeah. No.
Um,
But the ones that we listed, I think, are really quite great. ADP, I really like the oregano that's emulsified, so it actually gets like to the intestines where you want it to go. And then berberine, I like berberine less because I think it's a superior antimicrobial, truly,
yeah,
but because it has so many other effects. Like if I have somebody who has poor blood sugar regulation or diabetes or prediabetes, or if they have, metabolic syndrome, or if they have particular types of inflammation, I can, I'm gonna try to modify. I can feed two birds with one seed, if you will,
right, right.
with using berberine, because then we're getting some metabolic and anti-inflammatory benefit as well as the critter killing. So that's usually why I like berberine, because it could do so much more beyond the critter killing, and I
Right.
like to get two furs and three furs on board whenever I can.
Yeah, for sure. No, I agree.
Very talented molecule, the berberine.
Mm, nice.
Okay. This one. Okay, this one I might monopolize slightly anyway, maybe.
Oh yeah, I actually want you to
Okay.
monopolize this from an herbalist
Okay.
standpoint.
Yeah, and I'll share too. Like, there's so many good. So the next one, guys, confusing the audience, is 4 favorite adaptogens. And there's a bunch more. Like, they're all fantastic for different things. But I just wrote down the ones that I tend to use the most, and I'll give you just a couple of bullet points so that if you're trying to select adaptogens, maybe you can pick from this list first, perhaps. I am of the opinion nowadays that if you are breathing in the current day and age, you probably need adaptogenic support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whether you live in America or Switzerland or wherever, and if it's 2020 or if you're listening to this podcast in the future, you need adaptogens, honest to God, because we all are stressed. But my 4 favorites, number 1 and number 2 are probably tied for me, being ashwagandha and eleuthero. Ashwagandha is nice. They're both they're both like really nice foundations for a formula. If you're making a formula or tea, I would say ashwagandha doesn't taste super great. It smells a little bit funky, so you have to kind of cover up the taste a little bit with it. I like ashwagandha in particular because it has an anxiolytic effect to it. So in my people who have a lot of like anxiety and mind chatter and tension, and they really feel their stress more, and they're more like perceptive and aware of their stress, and they know damn well they're stressed, very often I will start them on ashwagandha. A caveat with ashwagandha, it's a little bit warming, but it's not going to like heat you up like ginseng would. So a lot of different body types and temperaments tend to do pretty well with ashwagandha. It is a nightshade, and occasionally that will be an issue for people. It's not always the case. I've had patients who really cannot do potatoes or tomatoes or peppers, but they can tolerate ashwagandha for whatever reason. So it's not across the board, but if you are sensitive to nightshades, that is something to be aware of with ashwagandha, just in case. If I'm not going to use ashwagandha, like if somebody doesn't have as much of an outward presentation of anxiety, or they're not as aware of as much anxiety, or if I don't want to use ashwagandha because of the nightshade component of it, then I'll tend to use eleuthero instead, because they do have some of the same like adaptogenic properties, and I think that they can be used both as like a foundational piece of a formula or as a standalone. What I would add to with ashwagandha is that it has some research regulating thyroid hormone and other hormones to some extent. Mm-hmm. So if you have like wacko female hormones and, you know, estrogen dominance, deficiency, whatever your flavor might be, or if you're a man and you have low normal testosterone, or if like your TSH is high, or if your T3, T4 conversion is off kilter, if any of the hormones are mucked up, ashwagandha seems to interact with all of like the sex hormones and the other hormones really nicely, which is a really nice added benefit of it. So those are some of my favorite things about that herb. You could use ashwagandha as a tincture. You could get it as a capsule with a powder capsule, or you could just take the powder and you can like make ashwagandha hot chocolate or ashwagandha truffles or ashwagandha treats out of it, and just use the powder in and of itself too.
Nice.
So it's fairly versatile.
From your perspective, do you prefer like a tea or a tincture or a capsule? Like, is there any preferred method from your standpoint?
If I'm doing it as a standalone, I'll do it as a capsule, in part because then people don't have to smell it and taste it so much. If I'm making a tincture and I'm combining multiple different herbs, I never give people singles as tinctures. It's kind of a rule of thumb, because like I'm making them suffer through the experience of having an alcohol-based extract and ingesting a tincture. Like if I'm doing a single herb, I might as well just do a capsule 9 times out of 10. But yeah, if I'm making a tincture anyway and I want to combine other herbs, then I would use ashwagandha as a tincture, and it works really well for that too.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, but if you're doing it as a single, I would just do capsules.
Yeah, cool.
For eleuthero, again, these are the 2 that I'll use. Like if I'm formulating and I'm mixing up compounded, custom blended tinctures for people, like I'll frequently have ashwagandha or eleuthero be like 30% of the volume of a tincture, for example. So it's a pretty big component of it.
Yeah.
Eleuthero, to the best of my knowledge, it's not as well understood to interact with like the sex hormones and the thyroid hormones and that sort of stuff nearly as well. And it isn't as anxiolytic or like anti-anxiety as ashwagandha. The thing that eleuthero is really known for is improving physical stamina and improving the immune system and boosting immune system function. So there's quite a lot of studies regarding that. And that's why it initially got a lot of attention, was back in the 80s, the Russian Olympic team, I forget if it was like 82 or 88 or what it was, but the Russian Olympic teams were using eleuthero rather, and they like kicked ass. And the whole world looked at them and were like, what are you doing? And then it came out that they were using eleuthero, and now it's one of the best studied herbs on planet Earth, if not the best studied herb, because the whole world made a point of listening to that when they said, oh yeah, all of our athletes take Eleuthero.
Oh my
And
gosh.
it's been documented now. It improves physical performance. It improves and boosts the immune system. And like I said,
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
no, go ahead. I was just going to reiterate something I said already.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I wonder if it's banned or in the athletic performance space.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think yeah, not to the best of my knowledge.
Hmm.
It's enhancing your own function. It's not like going above and beyond.
Yeah, you'd be surprised though. I know like one of my sister's really good friends in college played for University in Kentucky, and he got some supplement from GNC, like some, over the counter thing. And he was getting advised by someone, and it was he almost didn't get to go to the NFL because it was some like random thing in the supplement that he wasn't supposed to have. So sometimes they're really weird about that kind of stuff, but I'd assume not, but I was just curious.
If you're a professional athlete, please check. Consult with your medical team.
Right.
But yeah, anyway, so Eleuthero, I remember this one patient that I've been working with, and he had tried ashwagandha and it didn't really agree with him. I forget what symptoms it provoked. He didn't agree with him. And we both kind of said, well, maybe it's the nightshade thing. So he said, but I know I have stress and like I'm a student. I know I need to get this under control. So I said, all right, go buy you some Eleuthero capsules, because you could get Eleuthero in a powder capsule or as a tincture. So I said, just go get you some capsules full of Eleuthero powder and incorporate that. And I did. I got a text from him, I don't even know, like a week or two later. And he said, I was walking to school, I was walking to the gym, and I literally had like pep in my step. And I thought, man, like I've got good energy lately. And then the little light bulb went off and he went, oh my God, it must be the Eleuthero.
Right.
So it can be pretty wild when you start putting that together and you realize like, oh, this herb is magic.
Well, and I will say too, like, and I know we've talked about it on past episodes, but I find that that's how adaptogens are. Like, it's not necessarily like you take this adaptogen and immediately after you're getting this like boost. It is one of those things where it's like subtle at first, and then you're like, oh wow, like I can make it through my afternoon without taking a nap.
Exactly.
That tends to be what I see with my clients. It's like it takes the edge off.
Yeah.
And it helps them. They do notice energy effects. It's just more over time that they see them.
Yeah, and I always tell my patients, like when I send them home with any sort of adaptogen or nervine, which is another classification of different herbs, anything that's geared towards like the adrenals and the stress response and the gut-brain axis and the kind of stuff that we're hitting with these herbs, I always tell them, look, this is not the kind of herb that like you take it out a Tuesday and then Wednesday you feel amazing. Typically. Right. It's like you take it for a few weeks and then you notice a difference and it builds over time. But that being said, sometimes people report back within a couple days or a week and they say, oh my God, this is great. Right, so I'm not ruling that out. Like, I'm not saying that's not a possibility.
Right.
That makes sense. I'm not ruling that out as a possibility, but it's just not the typical. And I don't want you to take ashwagandha for 3 days and be like, this sucks, and throw it away. You've got to keep at it for a good couple of weeks, and then they get better the more you use them. So that's what I would say, to keep plugging away at the adaptogens. But yeah, I think that was a pretty good overarching story of Eleuthero. Similarly, if I'm using Eleuthero by itself, then I'll just get capsules of the powder. And Eleuthero is also called Siberian ginseng, FYI, so you might see capsules called Siberian ginseng rather than Eleuthero. But if I'm doing a tincture for somebody anyway, and I was already planning on making that, then I'll just use it as a tincture and put it as the base of the tincture.
Yeah. No, that's good information for sure.
Yeah. The last two I have a little bit less hefty opinions on because we've got to get through our other bullet points. But they are my other two favorites. Schizandra is probably my number 3. I use quite a lot of Schizandra. It's the Schizandra berry, or the seeds of the berry, is what's used for medicine. You could get the dried, whizzled up little berries on, Mountain Rose Herbs or Amazon, and you could just suck on the berries or the powder. It's called the 5 flavor berry. So you're going to experience all the flavors. You're going to experience sour and bitter and salty, and like it's a bit of an acquired taste. The first couple times you take it, you're going to be like, oh God, this is the worst ever. But I've gotten used to it to a point where I quite like Schizandra now, and I'll make kind of a tea out of the powdered berry, or I'll just suck on some of the little berries for the heck of it. The thing about Schizandra is it's very hepatoprotective. So if you have any liver stuff, or if you have like elevated liver enzymes or elevated C-reactive protein or elevated bile acids, anything like that, or a history of anything having to do with the liver, definitely consider this herb. It's hepatoprotective to a point where some studies suggest that it's even more hepatoprotective than milk thistle, which is pretty impressive because milk thistle is pretty good for the liver and hepatoprotective. I will frequently use Schizandra with my IBS and SIBO patients, again, as a pretty fair whack of their tinctures, because the liver is processing all of the crud coming up from the gut. So it's kind of checking each little bit of blood and making sure, okay, yep, that's good. You can go to the body. Okay, yep, that's safe to go to the body. And if it's not safe, if the liver sees, quote unquote, a lot of LPS or a lot of toxins or inflammation or metabolic byproducts from candida, it's the liver's job to try to deal with that somehow. And so under states of chronic gut disruption or dysbiosis or SIBO or candida overgrowth, I think that there's always going to be a little subtle liver dysfunction or inflammation that goes with that. Yeah. It might not be totally overt on like lab testing. Certainly if it's overt on lab testing and you know you have an issue with your liver, then Schizandra will be something I recommend you consider. But even for people who don't have something really like blatant and in your face having to do with the liver, I think that Schizandra is really nice for when we're talking about that like gut liver axis and the gut brain axis, because again, it's an adaptogen, so it's going to regulate your autonomic nervous system, your vagus nerve, and ultimately your response to stressors.
Yeah, that's really cool about the liver stuff. I definitely see the liver being stressed with my SIBO clients too. And a lot of times it sort of presents as either borderline high enzymes or like slightly high enzymes. Not like crazy high, but you can tell that the liver's under some stress. So that's cool that you can kill two birds with one stone.
Yes. Feed two birds with one seed, Amy. We're changing the narrative.
Wow. Okay, never mind. Feed two birds with one seed.
There you go. JK.
All right.
Yeah, so that's the story of Schizandra. My last top 4 adaptogens that I wanted to round out with was holy basil. What I would say is that holy basil tends to elevate your mood and like lift your spirits a bit and be very uplifting. But if you find that you're a person who's already kind of like flighty and like mentally checked out and kind of head in the clouds kind of person, or if you're very like Vata oriented, if you've done any sort of, Ayurvedic reading, if you have a lot of Vata energy and you're already kind of head in the cloud, kind of pie in the sky person, holy basil might push you more in that direction and make you a little bit more of a space cadet, because again, it tends to just like lift and elevate and lighten people. But it's also pretty anxiolytic. And it helps regulate that autonomic nervous system and the stress response really nicely too. And holy basil actually makes a really lovely tea. So you could do it as a tincture, you could do it as a capsule, but you could also drink this as a tea.
Yeah, I know. I've seen you drink holy basil in our podcast sessions.
Yep. Yeah, today I'm kind of actually boiling a little bit. I had to take off my beloved Christmas sweatshirt, so I think I closed up my door and I turned up the heat yesterday because I'm a living corpse. I'm always cold, and I think I turned the heat up a little bit too high. So side note, Amy, talk about something for like 30 seconds while I open up the door so I get some airflow in this room.
Right. Well, on that topic too, my husband never listens to me when I want the air to go up high, so I'm always cold. Nikki is pushing cold air back into the door.
Okay, I think that will help.
She's gone through the forest of some festive light ornament, some light Christmas light what would you call those?
Yeah,
Decorations?
yeah, Christmas lights.
But yeah, my husband
Yeah.
never lets me, or always kind of changes the air. We're always going back and forth. Like, it's cold. My office, the seal on the windows broken. I need to get it fixed so it gets
Oh,
like colder in here than it
oh.
should. Um, so it's
Well,
frustrating.
that's why I have a heated blanket
I
and a
need to.
humidifier. So that's actually the problem. The heat would be fine, but I keep a humidifier in my office in the winter, and then I turn it into like my tropical oasis sauna room.
Oh my
And I think I
gosh.
just went a little bit too wild.
Oh wow.
But yeah, life is a corpse. 'Cause
Right.
I'm always cold. And I don't have a thyroid issue. I check it twice a year. And I'm not anemic. Haven't been for years. Okay. Okay. So I'll kick this. I feel like we could do the last two. I'm going to skip over three. If you're really deeply curious, comment in the comments below and I will share. The three was supposed to be the 3 tests that nobody should do. But those have the potential to get me into a really long-winded mode, which would not be conducive to keeping the time on this podcast like I'm trying to. All right, I have my opinion of 2 supplements that nobody should ever take. Amy, I'd like to hear, do you have a strong opinion about supplements that nobody should ever take?
Right.
Or
And
am I
this
the
one
only...
was well, it was a little like, again, I saw yours, so I'm interested to kind of hear your take. And I don't know if I'd never, like, my supplements are maybe like that's an extreme, but I wouldn't necessarily advise people to take them. And there might be rare situations where it makes sense, but the one is Modal Pro. And it's not that it's not that the ingredients or anything are like inherently
It looks good
bad.
on paper. Yeah.
Right. It just tends to create a lot of symptoms in the clients that I work with. Like, no one really tolerates it well. It's expensive. It's so many capsules to be taking.
And they're horse capsules. They're huge.
Right. And it causes a lot of ginger burn. And it just is not a really helpful prokinetic. From a like symptom, you have to tolerate some symptoms usually with it. And there's a lot of other options instead of Modal Pro that can be used. So that's, again, I wouldn't say there's anything inherently like wrong about the ingredients, but it just is not something that I see as well tolerated.
I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Right. And then the other 2, I had 2, and they're both kind of like, I wouldn't say never use them, but I would be careful with using them.
Okay.
And these are kind of across the board. Like, I think lots of people use them, not just in the SIBO IBS space, but I think high dose melatonin, I think can be a really slippery slope for people. I'd much rather try to regulate sleep in other ways than melatonin. And melatonin can be actually used, like if you are switching time zones or something, as like a temporary solution.
Yep.
But I do find like popping melatonin is like a big thing in just general culture. But I see it here or there with my clients, and it just can be really dependency forming, I find, as well. So I'm a little, again, from a melatonin standpoint, that would be one I'd be careful of. And the only other one that I kept thinking of in my head was Senna. And Senna, again, like in short-term use might be helpful. Like but it's a pretty strong stimulant.
Yeah.
And you can definitely build dependency to it. So it's not necessarily one I would be relying on as like a long-term constipation helper. So those are the ones that I put. I'm interested again to hear your take on your 2 that I saw, but those are ones, again, I wanted to do something a little different than antimicrobials. So
well, and I think for the most part, I agree. I think Modal Pro, my big beef, it just, not a lot of people like it. You hit the nail on the head. Like, it doesn't tend to help people. It causes a lot of burning. I have people try all of the prokinetics for a week at a time, and consistently, it's to a point where now it's kind of funny. Like, a patient will get back to me. They will have tried 7 different prokinetics over 7 different weeks, And they get back to me and they're like, yeah, one of them, if you look at my notes, one of them caused a lot of heartburn. I was like, oh, I know which one that is.
Right.
And then I look at their notes, and sure enough, it was always freaking Pro. And it looks really great on paper. It does, but it just, when I do this, I call it prokinetic speed dating with patients. About 10% of the time, people pick that product versus about 50% of the time, they pick a different product. So like, if you're going to start somewhere, choose the one that 50% of people seem to really like.
Right.
I will link that video down below if you're on the YouTube thread right now, because that's a whole like scientific study I've been working on with my patients being guinea pigs. Love you all. But I agree. I think that Modal Pro is not worth its salt. Also, it annoys me that they only sell it in mega tubs. Would it kill them
huge
to have two different sizes? I mean,
well, I think when the dose is 6 caps too, that makes it
but if you don't know if it's going to help you, you don't want to buy a tub of the damn stuff.
Right. I'm not trying to defend them. I'm just saying, like,
darn it, Amy.
If the therapeutic dose is so high, that's probably why they're selling a tub.
Yeah. It's funny. I actually this is another kind of side thing. I recently emailed Pure Encapsulations and offered to help them reformulate it or formulate a new prokinetic because their prokinetic sucks so bad. So, and I love, but like Pure Encapsulations, if you're listening, I would be more than willing to help you with this. Wink, wink. But seriously, like, nobody picks your product. Just move on, make another one.
Right.
So yeah, I totally agree with that. Melatonin, I have a slightly different opinion on.
Okay.
I would say I agree with, I think the main point that you were making is that if you are finding that you have to pop melatonin all the time, you're probably band-aiding a bigger problem, and working on the root cause is more beneficial. I say the same thing about coffee. I don't have a problem with coffee, but if you're drinking like 6 cups of coffee every day, you're like band-aiding something else that we need to talk about. But coffee intrinsically isn't bad. It's just that you're using it as a crutch.
Right.
What I will say is that high dose melatonin, like real high, like 20 or 30 milligrams per day in the evening, obviously, is used to quite good effect with cancer.
Oh, cool.
It's an immune modulator. It's a Th1 promoter, and it has been studied quite a lot in cancer. I know breast cancer, I don't remember all the types for sure, but high dose melatonin can be really helpful for cancer. But again, like, you're not using it for sleep. You're just using it as basically like an immune modulator and antioxidant at that rate. So it's not really the same kind of stuff that we're talking about here.
Right. Yeah. No, that's really interesting. And I do know there's some melatonin stuff with COVID. I haven't dug into the research on that at all.
Same reason.
I would assume if there's the immunostimulating modulating effect, it could be having an effect on COVID. But it's interesting about the cancer. I was unaware of that.
Yep. Yeah, the same arm of the immune system, the Th1 arm of the immune system that's good at fighting off little critters like viruses and bacteria is also the side of the immune system that's mostly in charge of fighting off cancer.
Yeah.
So if you boost one, you boost the other. So it's a big old Th1 promoter, which is really useful. But yeah, if you're using it for sleep and you're finding that you're dependent on it, there's probably other things you could do to work on that rather than just band-aiding with melatonin.
Exactly.
And then Senna, I agree with you on the Senna. I think similarly, you can band-aid a symptom with Senna. You could band-aid the constipation, but ideally you would get to the root cause and figure out, like, well, why are you so constipated? Are you stressed out the wazoo? Are you not moving enough? Is your thyroid off kilter? Are you dehydrated? Do you have SIBO? Do you have dysbiosis? Like, what else can you do other than just taking the Senna?
Right. And I also think there's just other, like, motility supports that are less, like, stimulating and habit forming as well. So so that was my list. And again, I know the 2 on your list, so I'm not, like, held in suspense, but
I'll share them briefly. And I don't have quite as long-winded of an opinion on them. I just don't like them. My 2 are colloidal silver, which in my opinion, literally nobody should ever take this. There's no purpose for silver in the human body. I don't think it's smart. I really don't. It especially ingestion. I mean, I know they have colloidal silver toothpastes and ointments. Like, I could almost kind of see an ointment, maybe, if you have like a really resistant weird staph infection and you're in the hospital and your arm's going to get chopped off because of staph infection. Sure, try some topical colloidal silver.
Right.
But ingesting silver, like, that just doesn't strike me as a super good idea to do. And in my opinion, I'm very skeptical of the safety of colloidal silver. And if you're using it as an antimicrobial, why? There's so many others. We told you some of our favorites, but even like, I know people have taken colloidal silver for Lyme disease, which I don't think works. It's for SIBO, and I do not think it works for SIBO. Like, you have so many other options. No matter what your diagnosis, I guarantee you have better options than colloidal silver. And I'm really skeptical that it's safe.
Yeah.
My other one is really ironic because I listed biocidin. My biggest beef with biocidin is, well, I think it's very expensive for what you're actually getting. Like, it's not that, like, amazing of a blend. If you look at it on paper, or at least if you were to ask, like, an herbalist or somebody who actually knows herbs, it's like, all right, like, it's some echinacea, it's some, walnut or artemisian. It looks a little bit more like an anti-parasitic formula at a glance, with maybe a little bit of immunomodulation. But it's wicked expensive for what you get. I have not seen it to be ultra helpful. I've tried to use it a couple times. I said it's ironic because I currently have my daughter taking a little bit of it because I happened to have some laying around and we thought she had a UTI. But I haven't been super impressed. And I think it's really expensive for what you're actually getting with biocidin. And any herbalist or any like naturopath who knows their herbs, or anybody who really knows herbs, will just look at it and just laugh and say, nah, don't bother. So biocidin rounds out my top two. And look, Amy, we have utterly perfect timing. I'm going to get you off in time for your next call.
Excellent.
How perfect is that?
Love it.
I knew we wouldn't get through the top 12. That was way too ambitious. So we've worked our way from the 6 worst pieces of diet, or the 7 best, and basically 6 worst. We kind of did those all in one fell swoop.
Right.
Pieces of dietary advice, 5 favorite antimicrobials, 4 favorite adaptogens. We skipped over number 3, 2 supplements that nobody should take, / we kind of said 5. Oh, well. And then number 1, drum roll, please. Thank you. Is we have a special giveaway, guys. So if you are enjoying the podcast, we really hope you are. And if you would like to do basically a session with Amy and I and be a guest on the podcast, we are going to have a special raffle to round out 2020 and have a little bit of merry cheer in your year. If you tag us on Instagram, specifically, we now have an Instagram account for this podcast specifically, and the handle, Miss Amy, is...
Okay, hold on one second.
She'll tell us in a second.
Okay, I got it.
Okay.
ibs.freedom.podcast. So
Perfect.
at ibs.freedom.podcast.
For those of you who are old ladies and don't use the Instagram much like me, yes, at ibs.freedom.podcast. If you tag us in a post, say something nice like, hey, this is a cool podcast I've been enjoying. I don't know. Share a picture of a puppy for all I care. But post something saying a few words about the podcast and tag at ibs.freedom.podcast in your Instagram post. If you get that into us by the new year, we're going to do a raffle on January 1st. And then the lucky winner gets to, well, hopefully you think you're lucky. The winner gets to come on the podcast with us, and then we will do a session with you, basically, on the podcast. So obviously you need to be comfortable sharing some of your health stuff with an audience, but we would like to help you troubleshoot and navigate through some stuff and prioritize some stuff and make some recommendations for you. And we'll do basically a 45-minute session with both Amy and myself, tag teaming it and trying to get your gut off to the right start in 2021. So go ahead and tag us in a fun Instagram post, say a few words about the podcast, hopefully nice things, and we will post on our Instagram page and tag the winner when we do our drawing on January 1st. So that was our kind of 12 Days of Christmas-esque episode.
Like we did like 4 days.
We did
not consecutive.
5?
So.
Yeah,
okay.
It's close enough. Whatever. It was a bit of a mishmash, but I had fun. And
I had fun too.
It's our podcast, so that's ultimately
we make the rules.
what it's all about. But Amy, it was a freaking pleasure starting this podcast with you in 2020. It was a shit show of a year, but I think I texted you this already. You've been the highlight of 2020 for me. So thank you for
likewise.
Thank you for saying yes when a kind of a rando approached you and said, "Hey, you want to do a podcast?" And yeah, just thanks for being here every week with me.
Yeah, no, it's been so fun. It's been crazy because we haven't been able to record in a couple weeks, and I definitely missed it. Like
I did too. I was sulking.
I was sulking too. It's not, my Wednesdays aren't as fun when we don't record.
Agreed entirely. Well, we're gonna get back into it. The holidays have kind of threw us off our rhythm a little bit, but I look forward to recording many podcast episodes with you in January and beyond. And
can't wait.
Hopefully 2021 and beyond are much better years, because 2020 was weird. That's all I have to say.
It got weird for sure.
Yep. Shit happened in 2020. That is the handle. That's what you can tag us into the Instagram post. Tag us in a post that says
hashtag shit happened.
Shit happened in 2020. And then at ibs.freedom.podcast. And as always, if you're listening to this podcast on one of those like podcasting futuristic apps, go ahead and rate us 5 stars or thumbs up or do whatever you do on your particular app. Share it with the world. And if you're on YouTube, go ahead and click like, subscribe, comment down below. If you're really itching to know the 3 tests that nobody should ever do, in my opinion, go ahead and comment down below on YouTube, and I would be sure to share that next time. And that's it. Peace out, Cub Scout. We are out for 2020. Onward and upward, my dear.
Yeah.